Hey folks, I'm in my attorney chair. What is a legal summation? A legal summation is a chance for each side to reframe the evidence represented at trial so that the evidence looks favorable to that side. A proper summation will recite to the jury the facts that were proven in the case. The summation will explain the laws at issue in the case and apply those laws to the facts represented to convince the jury that the law is in favor to that party. A lawyer can also use a summation to explain why the other party's arguments are weak or incorrect. In this case, I will be defending Donna Osborne. My legal summation will include a recitation of evidence, a description of the laws that apply in this case, how the law applies, reasons why the facts do not support the other parties, and finally the judge's jury instructions. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, over the past couple of days, you have heard testimony from witnesses for both the prosecution and the defense. In review of these testimonies, we can clearly see that Donna Osborne was given one option to defend her life and her son's. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard Officer Powell's testimony from February 7th. Where he responded to a family disturbance at the Osborne house. First, you need to question the accuracy of the statement. The reports that evening were lost due to a fire. How convenient. Next, he testified to what he saw, but he stated he never actually spoken to Mrs. Osborne. You would think while reviewing the rest of the house in disarray that you would interrogate each one separately. That never happened. In fact, he also testifies that upon the garage after the shooting that he found a baseball bat next to a dozen black roses. Not the kind of things normally given to a wife on Valentine's Day. Next, we heard from Leslie Crown, a close family friend for 30 years and knew Clint his whole life. Bringing your wife to a family friend multiple times for cuts, bruises, stitches, broken bones, and never once was this questioned. Once again, I use the term family friend. One has to wonder if Mrs. Osborne had been brought to the emergency room. Would any of her injuries been ethically questioned? Maybe we should ask a doctor who is a family friend. Then there was Claire Osborne, the deceased mother. Talk about a tainted viewpoint. But I do believe her when she accepted her husband losing her temper with her. In fact, she felt like this was okay. She only witnessed Clinton being rough with Donna once. Again, she was raised to think that this was okay. It's not. Do you feel being shoved into a chair is okay? It's not. Lastly, we heard from Lynn Johnson, the prosecution expert brought in to refute the defense expert. What strikes me as being a little off and should concern you as a jury is she never examined Donna Osborne. She has read all the statements that you have heard, but is making a professional judgment. without examining the defendant. It sounds like to me she is someone who wanted her $1,500 without having to do much. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, now that we have a better view of what the prosecution was trying to do, let's take a closer look at what you and I really know what happened. From 1989 through 1991, Donna Osborne was forced to endure abuse that none should ever have to deal with. I'm going to tell you a little story about what happened to Donna Osborne. And I'm going to try to condense things that you will see as I do, what Donna Osborne has to deal with. And just maybe you'll understand how she felt. Here we go. Once upon a time, there was a married couple who shortly after the wedding developed problems. The husband would verbally abuse his wife, would become physically violent, would push her to the ground, and open her head with a thrown baseball, was thrown down a flight of stairs, causing a broken arm, would be knocked to the ground and whacked in the stomach with a golf club, breaking her ribs. Then when he threatens to take her son, crush her skull with a baseball bat and kill her. She's supposed to endure that as well? No, she defends herself and shoots him. Oh yeah. And through all of this, the doctor, a family friend, never once picked up on this. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you heard Lee Harris testify. She was on the staff at Options for Battered Women. In reviewing the records, she called the hotline 3 times. She spoke about Donna Osborne being abused physically and mentally. And the prosecution argued she have never accepted further help. Dr. Lenore gave us a look into how battered women actually react. Too many are put in positions and never leave. So let's examine exactly what Kim Lenore told us. Remembering that she's an expert in area in psychological disease and the foremost expert of battered women syndrome. And please remember that this expert actually met with Donna Osborne. She actually met with her 3 times for 45 minutes each. She concludes that Donna Osborne has a psychological syndrome that distorts their feelings, beliefs, and behavior. It scientifically explains why women treated like Donna Osborne never try to leave or escape. When Donna Osborne finally believes, she believes that her life is threatened. She believed that she had no choice but to respond to her husband picking up the bat. She defended herself and her life. You've heard other testimony from Jack Matthews. You heard from another witness that saw how he squeezed her arm, or how he heard the sound of a slap. He felt so compelled that he called 911 as he feared for her, trying to believe what the prosecution states as an elaborate scheme to kill her husband just doesn't hold water. It's all a lie. This is a classical case of battered woman syndrome. that caused and abused an afraid woman to defend herself and her life. Members of the jury, the judge has given you clear instruction on how to handle this case. Murder in the second degree. Manslaughter in the first degree. All of which you may deliberate, but let's not forget, if any defendant acted under the influence of extreme emotional disturbance for which there was a reasonable explanation or excuse, the reasonableness of which is to be determined from the viewpoint of a person in the defendant's situation under the circumstances as the defendant believed them to be. If you find this to be true, you must find my client not guilty. Part 11. Again, instructions from the judge are: reasonable doubt in the criminal case means that there is sufficient evidence to justify the finding of guilt beyond doubt that a reasonable man would have. If you feel that based on the facts presented to you that there is reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty of either or both charges, return a verdict of not guilty. I would simplify this for you. If you have doubt in your mind that my client is guilty of murder, you must find in favor of my client. If not, you could be the next Mrs. Donna Osborne.